title of the Devo today that I'm going to talk on is the big, fat, ugly elephant in the room called temptation. It's one of those things that not a lot of people like to talk about, but we all acknowledge that it's there. So temptation, saying yes to the promise. If you have the Bibles ready, go ahead and flip to one of the first books we're going to look at, 1 John chapter 4. And then the second verse we're going to look at is also going to be in 1 Corinthians. So it started off like, I know we've been in the program for a couple months now, and I think a lot of us came to this program thinking that stepping out and going away from our home would leave all those temptations behind. But the truth is, we're still stuck here on planet Earth. No matter where you're going to go, you're still going to face temptations, whatever it might be. Some of us, temptations are going to be different. And my definition of temptation is anything that's going to steer you away from or hinder you from what God has in store for you or what God has planned for you. Temptation is not glorifying God to your full, utmost capability. So let's look and see what John has to say in chapter 4. He says, "Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. Because many false prophets have gone out into the world, and this is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, but every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming, and even now is already in the world. You, dear children, us, are from God and have overcome them. Because the one who is in you is greater than he that is in the world. They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God, and whoever knows God listens to us, but whoever is not from God does not listen to us. And this is how we recognize the spirit of truth and the spirit of falsehood." One of the biggest things that I got from that verse is, greater is he that's within me than any temptation we're going to face in this world. And we have to rest assured with that whenever we face temptation. The second one we're going to look at is 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. Paul is talking to the Corinthians, and he says, "No temptation is overtaking you, except for what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can handle. But when you are tempted, he will provide a way out so that you can endure it." So Paul's acknowledging the fact that just because you have Christ in your heart doesn't mean you're not going to be tempted. He tells you you're going to be assured, you're going to be tempted. But just as John said, greater is he that's within you than any temptation you're ever going to face. So rest assured with this. And I was thinking about it, and there were a few characters that I looked at, I was like, alright, so if we're going to be tempted, people in the Bible must have been tempted, right? So I started thinking, David for sure. First he was tempted with Saul. Saul was trying to kill him. He's sitting back. The guy trying to kill him is sitting right in front of him. He had the temptation of his flesh to go ahead and kill the man who's trying to kill him. Did he? No. Then again, we saw that David was also tempted with Bathsheba. He gave into his flesh. He gave into temptation. Noah, think about building an ark for that many years. If I'd be tempted to slack off a little bit, maybe not fully commit to the dimensions that Christ gave me. Like, God, I don't have that much wood. Maybe I can cut it down, cut it in half. I don't need that many animals. Moses, he was probably tempted by his insecurities. His insecurity of not being able to speak well. Saying, God, I'm not called, I'm not worthy, I can't go. But did he give into that temptation? No. He brought freedom. Samson, tempted by Delilah. Peter, tempted to deny Jesus 3 times. Judas, tempted by silver to sell out Jesus. And the last one, even Jesus was tempted 3 times in the desert. We see in Matthew chapter 4. This is just, it's awesome what Jesus does, because everything Jesus does, he does for us to follow in his example. Yeah. And what he does is powerful. He says, he's on this 40-day fast in the desert. Satan comes up to him. Satan says, "All right, if you are the Son of God, go ahead and turn this stone into bread." Jesus doesn't say the words from himself. He says the words from the Father. He quotes Scripture. He says, "It is written, man should not live on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God." The devil takes him up to a cliff. He says, "If you are the Son of God, go ahead and jump off this cliff. Let the angels catch you." Jesus doesn't say any words of himself. He says the words of the Father. He quotes Scripture. He says, do not put the Lord your God to the test. And the last one, Satan takes him, overlooking all this kingdom. He says, look, if you bow down to me, all of this, I'll make all of this yours. Jesus doesn't say any words from himself. He says the words from the Father. He quotes Scripture. He says, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And that's a tremendous example that we need to follow, is when we face temptation, don't say the words of yourself. Don't say anything that you may think is going to be right. Quote Scripture and quote the words of the Father to make that temptation go away. Don't look at temptation as an opportunity to get into sin, but look at temptation as an opportunity to glorify God through your obedience. I want to kind of make a little illustration. Do 5 people have a cell phone with a calculator on it? You can stay in your seat, but if you have so 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5. Okay, so if you have your calculators ready, go ahead and put in 74, 75, 76, 77, and 78. Okay, so you're going to take those numbers, multiply it by 12. Okay, so you have your answer. Remember that answer. Clear your calculator. Take the number 9 and divide that by the answer that you were given. Okay, so now you have that answer. Now multiply by 100. I'll explain this. Your answer should have been between the range of 0.96 to 1.01. Is that right? So what was your answer? 1.01? 1? 0.974? 0.9615. Okay, so what we just did was all these numbers range from 0.96 to 1.01. So I looked up on the Harvard Health Sciences, and they said that the average age of a human being right now is about 77.6 years old. There's a lot of variables that come into play when we're talking about the average age of a person, from where they're from, how they're raised, male or female, but in a general sense, the average age is 77.6 years. So I took 74 years, 75 years, 76 years, 77, 78. In a general census, I'm saying that we're going to live 74 to 78 years old. So if you take that number, let's say, for example, I'm going to use the number 75 because it works out really, really well and easily. So let's say I'm going to live 75 years. I take that number of years, I multiply by 12, how many months are in a year. That gives me 900 months. I live 900 months in my life. I take the 9-month commitment that I've dedicated to this DCLS program, and I divide it by my total number of months that I've lived. And I multiply it by 100 to get it into percentage form, and it equals exactly 1%. And I also want to paint this picture. If you have a pot of water, you want to heat up that water to boil it. You can't boil water at 99 degrees. You have to heat up the pot of water to 100 degrees. If you have 99 degrees, you're just going to have hot water. But you heat up that pot of water to 100 degrees, the nature of the water starts to change. It's no longer a liquid. It starts to turn to a gas. The nature of the water starts to change. And for us, it's not by mere accident that the math just worked out that it did, that this program is only 1% of our life. But give 100% for this 1% of your life, and the nature of who you are, the nature of what God has in store for you is going to start to change. You're not going to be 99 degrees at the end of this year. You're going to be 100 degrees. You're going to go back home. People are going to start to see something different within you. People are going to see something that's going to exude from you. You're not going to be lukewarm anymore. The nature of who you are is going to change. And temptation is going to want to hold us back from going that one more step, from going that 100%. And I know from experience, there's so many times for us to hold back. There's so many times for us to give in to temptation, to slack off, to let our minds get polluted, to stray away from what God has called for us. But I want to challenge us. First year, second year staff, we're all here for this 9-month commitment. Let's change. Let's go 100%. Let's no longer be warm, but with the nature of who we are, let God change us. Let's continue to do this. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for just this opportunity to speak to this class, to speak to this